My brother tried to sabotage my new business, but I turned it into a success story. Is there anything else you want to admit before my lawyer gets here? I ask, and my voice comes out calmer than I feel. The cease and desist letter is on the dining table between us, right next to my mother's half-finished cup of tea and the salt shaker shaped like a chicken. My brother Daniel leans back in his chair like this is some minor inconvenience instead of my entire livelihood he's been playing chess with. His jaw works. His leg bounces under the table and he avoids my eyes, staring at the envelope that has both of our names on it like it magically addressed itself. He laughs, this short, ugly sound. "You're being dramatic, Lena," he says, but there's sweat shining at his hairline. "It's just business. You can't handle a bit of competition, that's not my problem." It started the day I quit my safe job. It was a Thursday afternoon, fluorescent office lights buzzing. My manager trying to convince me that staying on as an assistant marketing coordinator at a logistics company was a terrific long-term opportunity. I remember nodding politely, while inside my brain something kept repeating, I do not want my life to be approving emails about pallet deliveries. I'd been baking on the side for years. Custom cakes, cinnamon buns, small batch sourdough that my friends joked should come with a warning label because it ruined supermarket bread for them. When the pandemic hit and everyone went feral for carbs, my little Instagram account blew up. People I'd never met were DMing me for birthday cakes and boxes of pastries. My parents thought it was cute. A little side hustle is how my dad put it. Daniel, on the other hand, rolled his eyes. "Everyone thinks they're an entrepreneur now," he said, scrolling through his phone while I boxed up yet another order on their kitchen bench. Daniel and I have always been complicated. He's 2 years older, the golden child growing up. The one who made rep teams in soccer, who could charm teachers into extensions, who my mother described to relatives as our little businessman, even when he was just flogging secondhand video games on Facebook Marketplace. I was the quiet one with flour on her shirt, the girl who got good grades without causing trouble. Our parents understood him. He was the son who wanted to go into business. Me saying I wanted to open a bakery sounded to them like saying I wanted to open a lemonade stand. When I told them I'd handed in my resignation and signed a lease on a tiny corner shop 2 blocks from the train station, my mother went pale. "Lena, in this economy?" she asked, folding her dishcloth with unnecessary precision. "You're giving up a permanent job." "It's not permanent," I said. "They literally restructure every 6 months. And I'm already making decent money from orders without even having a storefront. With a proper space, I can expand, offer coffee, actually see daylight." Dad said something about risk and not biting off more than I could chew. Daniel just shrugged and said, "Hope you've thought it through." In that tone that meant he assumed I hadn't. I had thought it through. For months, I'd made spreadsheets, done costings, shadowed a friend of a friend who'd opened a cafe. I'd saved aggressively for 2 years, skipped holidays, lived with my parents longer than I wanted to because rent plus commercial lease was too much. Walking into that empty shop with its cracked tiles and faint smell of grease felt like stepping into a sketchbook. I could see it already. White tiles, warm wood, glass cabinet full of pastries. A tiny table by the window where someone could sit and read. It wasn't glamorous. The first few months were paint-stained clothes, aching feet, and arguments with contractors who didn't turn up. I learned more about grease traps, council permits, and the exact dimensions of a compliant hand-washing sink than I'd ever wanted. But watching it come together, seeing the old greasy takeaway sign come down and my logo go up, felt like breathing properly for the first time in years. The name was Crumb and Compass. It was this nerdy little reference to both baking and direction. I wanted it to feel like a place you could find your way to and from. I registered the business name, set up the socials, designed a logo with a friend who did graphic design. We did a soft launch on Instagram. Photos of test bakes, behind-the-scenes stories of me covered in flour at 5 a.m., polls asking whether people preferred orange or teal for the coffee cups. People seemed excited. Friends shared. Locals started following. Daniel watched all this with some mix of bemusement and thinly veiled judgment. He'd gone into car sales after uni and then into consultancy, which from what I could tell involved wearing too much cologne and saying things like leveraging synergies in Zoom meetings. He had strong opinions about my business model, despite never having set foot behind a counter that wasn't in a dealership. "You're undercharging," he said, one night when I was hunched over my laptop at the dining table, trying to calculate price per slice on different cake sizes. Artisan bakeries in the city charge way more. You're going to attract bargain hunters, and then you'll never raise your prices. I literally had you tell me last week that my prices were high for a suburb that still has a $5 schnitzel night, I reminded him. He shrugged. I'm just saying, you need to think bigger if you want this to last. Thinking bigger for me meant dreaming of hiring one part-time barista so I didn't have to pull shots and pipe buttercream at the same time. Thinking bigger for him meant, apparently, seeing every human interaction as a potential client or lever. The first weird thing happened 2 weeks before opening. I got an email from the council saying there'd been an anonymous complaint about my premises not being compliant with food safety regulations. I remember reading it 3 times, my stomach dropping. We'd just passed initial inspection. The inspector had given me a list of minor things to fix. More signage, a thermometer in the fridge, and I'd done all of it. At this stage, it's just a follow-up visit, the email said. We will attend site next week to confirm compliance. I barely slept. I spent the next 3 days deep cleaning every surface within an inch of its life. I checked use-by dates like a maniac. When the inspector came, he looked almost embarrassed. We had to respond, he said, glancing around at my still mostly empty shop. But everything looks fine. Better than fine. Honestly, I wish half the places I visit were this organized. Did the complainant say what the issue was? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He shook his head. Just that they'd heard you were operating without proper facilities, which you obviously are not. I joked to my friend Mia later that it must have been some rival cafe mad I was opening nearby. You know you've made it when you have haters, she said, raising her coffee. I didn't connect it to Daniel. Why would I? Opening week was chaos in the best possible way. I made too much of some things and not enough of others. The cinnamon scrolls sold out by 9 a.m. every single day. People posted photos of their coffee next to the window, tagging my account. Kids pressed their noses against the glass cabinet. I went home every night aching but high on adrenaline, already planning the next day's bake. My parents came by eventually. Dad stood at the counter looking around like he was inspecting a construction job. It's very you, he said, which I decided to take as a compliment. Mom teared up when she saw my logo on the takeaway cups. Your grandmother would be so proud, she said. Daniel came too, with his girlfriend Jess. He leaned against the wall, watching the line. Not bad, he said. Could do with more seating, but not bad. He bought a coffee and a brownie, insisted on paying, then critiqued the till layout. You're losing time with how you've arranged your buttons, he said. You should streamline the most popular items. I've been open for 4 days, I said. Give me a minute. The Sabotage, when it fully showed itself, was a drip, not a dump. First came the reviews. I started seeing a weird pattern on Google. 5 great 1. The 1-star reviews all had a similar vibe. Overpriced. Owner was rude. Waited 30 minutes for a coffee that never came. The names were generic, no profile pics. One said, heard from a friend that the kitchen is filthy, would not risk it. I took it personally because of course I did. I could remember every customer, every interaction. Had I snapped at someone while tired? Forgotten an order? When I clicked through, I saw that most of these accounts had only ever reviewed my business and, randomly, a couple of car dealerships on the other side of town. I screenshotted them and sent them to Mia. This feel off to you? I asked. She replied immediately. Yeah, that's weird. Fake review vibes? Maybe report them? I did. Google took down 2 after I flagged them as suspicious. The others stayed. New ones appeared. One mentioned me by name, incorrectly calling me Linda and complaining that I argued about a discount. I've never offered discounts. The jealousy that comes with starting something of your own is something no one really warns you about. Not just other people's, the potential for your own. I'd get a high from a busy Saturday morning, then crash when the afternoon was dead. I'd scroll through other cafes' Instagram feeds and compare my follower count, my latte art, my everything. I tried not to obsess over the reviews, but every new notification made my stomach clench. The turning point came on a Monday night at my parents' place. I'd gone over for dinner because Mom had texted, "We never see you anymore, our busy little baker." And guilt still works faster than any RSVP app. We were halfway through roast chicken when my dad said, "So how's business?" Daniel says it's steady. I frowned. Steady is one word, I said. It's actually been really good. A lot of repeat customers already. Daniel smirked, cutting his meat. Just don't get ahead of yourself, he said. These things boom at the start and then nosedive when the novelty wears off. Thank you for that encouraging forecast, I said. Mom shot him a look. Your sister is doing amazingly, she said. I saw on her little online page that she had a line out the door on Saturday. It's called Instagram, Mom, I said. Daniel snorted. Yeah, well, Instagram doesn't pay the rent, he said. You need long-term strategy, systems, reputation. He took a sip of his beer. Speaking of, have you considered hiring a proper marketing consultant? I have a degree in marketing, I reminded him. Yeah, but that's theory, he said. Real world is different. I could help you if you weren't so stubborn. Something in his tone pricked me. What kind of help? I asked. Positioning, he said vaguely. Differentiation, making sure you stand out. He shrugged. Just saying it's a crowded market. Be a shame if you got lost. Mom changed the subject then, asking me about a cousin's wedding. But the words stuck to my ribs all night. 2 days later, I got the letter. It came to the shop in a plain envelope with my business name printed neatly. Inside was a formal, lawyerly document full of phrases like intellectual property infringement and passing off. The gist, another business, Crumb and Company, claimed my name and branding were confusingly similar to theirs, and they were demanding I cease using Crumb and Compass immediately. Accompanying it were screenshots, my logo next to theirs, similar fonts, different icons, my Instagram handle circled, my signage. At the bottom, a signature from a law firm I didn't recognize. My first reaction was panic. Full body, breath short, hands shaking panic. I pictured ripping down my sign, reprinting every menu, rebranding everything I'd built. I called the number on the letter and got a receptionist who transferred me to a junior lawyer who sounded about 12. We've been instructed by our client to request that you change your trading name and branding, he said, in a tone that suggested he'd said some version of that sentence 100 times. Who is your client? I asked. I'm not at liberty to share details beyond what's in the letter at this time, he replied. But I can say that if we don't hear from you within 14 days, we'll have to consider further action. I hung up and sat on the floor behind the counter, feeling like the tiles were tilting. 14 days. I didn't have money for a rebrand. I barely had a buffer as it was. I showed the letter to Mia that night. She read it twice, then frowned. This is weird, she said. Crumb and Company? Have you Googled them? I hadn't. My brain had gone straight from problem to this is my fault for not checking everything twice. We searched. There was no Crumb and Company in our city. There was one in another state, a small home-based business with a Facebook page that hadn't been updated in a year. Their logo, fonts, everything completely different. What if this is fake? Mia asked slowly. Law firms don't send fake letters, I said. Okay, but what if whoever hired them gave them dodgy info? She said. Or what if this is someone trying to mess with you? The idea that someone would go to those lengths to mess with me felt insane. And yet, the last few months of anonymous complaints and oddly specific one-star reviews started arranging themselves into a pattern I didn't like. I called the law firm again, this time asking more questions. When the junior tried to stonewall me, I asked to speak to a partner. I don't know if it was the cracked edge in my voice or the fact that I kept repeating, this is my livelihood. But eventually a more senior-sounding man got on the line. After some back and forth, he let slip that their client had approached them claiming to be a co-owner of my business who'd had a falling out and was trying to set up a similar venture elsewhere. They'd shown him a registration for Crumb and Company in their own name, plus some printouts of my branding. My client's name? He said. Daniel Hart. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Daniel? I repeated. Daniel Hart? As in, my brother? There was an awkward pause. I assumed you knew, he said. I hung up without even pretending to be polite. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I sat there in the back room of my bakery, surrounded by sacks of flour and boxes of takeaway cups, and let the fury climb up my spine like a fever. By the time I drove to my parents' house, my anger had gone through white hot and come out the other side into something cold and sharp. Mom opened the door, surprised to see me without warning. Lena, darling, what's wrong? she asked, seeing my face. Is Daniel here? I asked. He was, of course, sitting at the dining table scrolling on his phone. Like always, he looked up, smirk ready, then faltered when he saw me properly. What's with the murder face? He joked weakly. I dropped the letter on the table in front of him. Thought you could explain this? I said. He glanced at it, then further down than I had the first time, to the part where his name was definitely printed as the client. The color drained from his face, then came back in blotches. You spoke to them, he said. It wasn't a question. You tried to steal my business name. My voice was shaking, but I wasn't whispering. You registered a copycat company and hired lawyers to scare me into giving up mine. Mum's eyes flicked between us, confused. What is she talking about, Daniel? He straightened, tried on arrogance like a jacket that didn't quite fit. I didn't steal anything, he said. I registered an alternative brand in case yours failed. It's just good business sense. We could have franchised later. We? I repeated. There is no we in my business. You have done nothing but criticize me from the sidelines, and you faked being a co-owner to a law firm. Do you realize how illegal that is? Dad came in then, wiping his hands on a tea towel. What's going on? He asked. Your son, I said, not looking away from Daniel, has been filing anonymous complaints about my shop, leaving fake reviews, and now he's tried to launch a copycat business using my name and branding. Mum gasped. Daniel? He scoffed, but his leg was bouncing again under the table. You can't prove any of that, he said. The lawyer literally told me your name, I said. They have your registration for Crumb & Company. I can subpoena IP addresses for the reviews if I have to. How far did you think this would go? He pushed back his chair, standing like he wanted to loom. I was trying to help, he snapped. You're naive, Lena. You don't think beyond the next batch of muffins. I thought if I created something stronger, we could pivot, bring in investors. You're wasting potential. You tried to destroy what I built because you were angry it wasn't your idea, I said. I could feel my throat tight, eyes burning, but I was past the point of giving him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. That's not help. That's sabotage. Mum stepped between us, one hand on my arm, one on his chest. Stop, she said, voice trembling. Both of you. We can talk about this calmly. I am calm, I said. I've been calm through fake complaints, through one-star reviews, through months of him dripping poison in your ears. I'm done being calm about someone trying to take my life's work out from under me. Dad looked at Daniel, really looked at him, in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids and he'd been caught shoplifting lollies. Tell me this isn't true, he said. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he muttered, It's just business. Again, as though that was some magic spell. Dad shook his head, something breaking in his expression. No, he said. Business would be talking to your sister about a partnership. Business would be pitching her your ideas. This is jealousy. I took a breath, unclenched my jaw. Here's what's going to happen, I said, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. Tomorrow, you're going to contact that law firm and tell them you misrepresented yourself. You're going to withdraw any complaints you filed with the council. You're going to stop writing reviews about a place you clearly can't stay away from. And then you're going to stay the hell out of my business. Literally and figuratively. You think you can threaten me? He said, but his voice wasn't as strong now. I'm not threatening, I said. I'm promising. If you don't, I will file my own complaint with the Law Society, with Consumer Affairs, with whoever I have to. I will tell them you pretended to be a co-owner to get legal leverage over a company you had nothing to do with. That's fraud, Daniel. They could disbar your precious lawyers if they don't act. They will not like that. Silence. Then, quietly, Mum said, You will fix this, Daniel. No coddling, no half-hearted excuses, just flat expectation. He looked at her, at Dad, at me, and realized, I think, for the first time that he didn't have their automatic backing. Some of the bravado leaked out of him. Fine, he muttered. I'll talk to them. I left after that. I didn't trust myself to stay without saying something unforgivable. The next few weeks were bizarre. The law firm sent another letter this time withdrawing their complaint and apologizing for any distress caused by incomplete information provided by our client. A couple of the suspicious reviews disappeared after I flagged them with screenshots of Daniel's fake accounts. The counsel never showed up again, but the damage, weirdly, didn't do what Daniel had planned. Instead of killing my business, it gave me a story. It started small. I wrote a long, honest post on the bakery's Instagram about growing pains. I didn't name Daniel or even mention family. I talked about anonymous complaints, fake reviews, and the way small businesses are especially vulnerable to targeted attacks. I talked about the night I sat on my flour-dusted floor, convinced I'd have to shut down because someone with more resources wanted me gone. I talked about how with help, I'd fought back. I'm sharing this, I wrote, because if you love your local spots, your favorite cafe, the tiny bookshop, the nail salon where they know your name, remember that what keeps them alive is you choosing them. Not just once on opening week, but over and over. And maybe also, don't leave fake one-star reviews because you're in a bad mood. I hit post, thought it might get a few sympathetic comments, then went to bed. By morning, my notifications were a mess. People shared it. Other small business owners commented with their own stories of anonymous complaints and petty sabotage. A local blogger with a decent following reposted it, adding, "Go buy a cinnamon scroll from a crumb band compass today." The story spun into something bigger than my own drama. Customers came in saying things like, "Saw your post, we've got your back, and some people have nothing better to do, huh?" A woman who ran a florist down the road brought me a coffee and said, "You should start a little alliance. Station Street Locals or something. We can support each other." So I did. We set up a shared hashtag. We made a little map flyer of all the independent businesses in the area and left stacks in each shop. We posted each other's promos. When the barber got hit with a troll storm on Facebook, the rest of us piled into the comments with 5-star reviews and actual photos. A journalist from a local paper came by one day, asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed for a piece on online bullying of small businesses. I said sure, on the condition that the focus was on the broader issue, not my family drama. She wrote a surprisingly thoughtful article about how easy it is to weaponize complaints and how hard it is for small operators to defend themselves. My photo me in my apron, flour on my arm, holding a tray of croissants, ended up on the front page of the local section. Business boomed. Not overnight, not in a fairy tale way where suddenly I was franchising across the state, but steadily. I sold out most days. I hired that part-time barista. I put aside money for a new oven. At some point in all this, a woman named Faith came in. I remember her because she ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and a slice of whatever cake I had, then sat in the corner with a notebook instead of a laptop. Over a few visits, we got talking. Turned out she was a small business accountant who'd just gone freelance. She'd read the article, liked how I talked about my numbers without flinching. "If you ever want someone to help you make a proper plan," she said, "I'd be happy to trade services. I'll go through your books if you keep me in cinnamon scrolls." Best deal I've ever made. With her help, I stopped winging it and started actually strategizing. We streamlined my menu on quiet days, introduced a pre-order system for big cake orders, so I wasn't killing myself for people who might ghost. Within 6 months, I wasn't just keeping up. I was saving. As for Daniel, I didn't speak to him for a long time. Months. He texted a couple of times, half-hearted, "Hey, how's the shop?" Messages that I ignored. Mom updated me that he'd lost a consulting job after word got around about his. Creative interpretation of co-owner. The law firm he'd hired dropped him as a client. Actions, consequences. One afternoon, about a year after the whole thing blew up, he came into the bakery. I saw him before he saw me, standing in line looking smaller somehow, hair a bit thinner at the temples. My heart did its usual angry little jump, but underneath it there was something else. Exhaustion, maybe. When he got to the counter, he didn't try to joke. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" "We're kind of busy," I said, nodding at the line. "I'll wait," he replied. And he did. For an hour, nursed a coffee at the corner table, watched me move around the space he'd once tried to claim. When the rush died down, I sat opposite him. "You've got 10 minutes, I said. He looked older. Not in a dramatic way, just less invincible. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble. For what it's worth. It's worth something, I said. But it doesn't fix it. I know, he said. I've had a year of things not going my way to think about it. He sighed. I was jealous. You did the thing I always said I would do. You actually built something, and people loved it. I kept waiting for it to fail so I could swoop in and save you and feel important. When it didn't, I tried to force it. I told myself it was just business. But it wasn't. It was me being a pathetic, insecure prick. Hearing him say it so plainly knocked some of the air out of my anger. Not all. Enough that I could breathe. I'm not going to pretend that we're fine now, I said. Because we're not. I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will in the way I did when we were kids. But I appreciate you saying it. And I'm glad you're finally being honest, at least with yourself. We sat there, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. A little kid dropped a spoon somewhere, his mum apologizing. The bell on the door jingled as someone came in, letting in a gust of cool air. You really turned this place into something, he said, looking around. Yeah, I said. I did. That night, after I closed, I stood in the middle of the shop and looked around properly. The scuffed but solid floor. The hand-lettered menu board Faith had talked me into. The constellation of grease spots on the oven that no one but me would ever notice. It hit me all at once. I'd taken every attempt to knock me down, every fake review, every threatening letter, every undermining comment, and turned them into scaffolding. My brother tried to sabotage my new business. He threw everything he could think of at it, hoping it would crumble so he could feel big in the ruins. Instead, he accidentally handed me a story people rallied around, pushed me into finding allies, forced me to learn my rights and my numbers and my own resilience. I don't forgive him, not fully. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the clean, tidy way people imagine forgiveness looks. But I've stopped letting his insecurity be the measure of my success. When I unlock the door each morning and the smell of sugar and yeast hits me, when I see someone take their first bite of something I made and smile without thinking about it, I know, deep in my bones, that this story belongs to me. He didn't get to break it. I did what bakers have always done. I took the mess, the scraps, the things that looked ruined, and I turned them into something that rose.